An Army judge has acquitted Bradley Manning of aiding the enemy. However, the controversial soldier has been found guilty of more than 20 lesser counts. The sentencing phase of the case begins tomorrow at Fort Meade outside Baltimore. And joining us to explain what kind of penalty Manning can expect is Eugene Fidell, the Florence Rogat's visiting lecturer in law at Yale Law School. Thank you very much for joining us, Eugene.
It's my privilege.
What conclusions did you draw from these rulings?
Well, first of all, I'm sure the defense camp is very pleased that the most serious offense has now been taken off the table for good. I think Private Manning is still in a world of trouble. I think he's facing a very serious sentence, even though it may not reach the boxcar numbers that he could achieve had he been convicted of aiding the enemy. But more broadly, I think it's such an interesting case. Here, the federal government took on a junior enlisted man who has admitted doing some, really wrong things. It had an aggressive prosecution. It tried for one of the most serious offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it failed. And we have an Army colonel saying the federal government failed to carry its burden of proof. Really, in a way, it's a triumph for the military justice system. Now, I'm usually considered a fairly critical observer of the system, and I'm actually quite critical of the way parts of the Manning case have been conducted, such as the pretrial confinement and such as the pathetically unsatisfactory transparency arrangements. But looked at from that particular perspective, here we have an individual who's really beaten the government at its own game in a case that the government presumably did its level best to get a conviction in. So it's quite interesting to me.
And I understand that this will automatically go for an appeal, right? And this will go sort of all the way up the food chain again, right?
Right, and let's mention what the food chain is here. The first thing is that after the sentence is announced, the case will be reviewed by the commander of the Military District of Washington, who is the so-called convening authority. His post-trial role, by the way, is very controversial right now in Congress because of some sexual assault legislation that's pending. After that general acts on the record, and he can reduce the charges, he can adjust the sentence downwards, not upwards, obviously. The case will go to the United States Army Court of Criminal Appeals in Northern Virginia. That's a court composed of Army JAG lawyers. And then the case could potentially go to the United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. That's a civilian court. The judges there are appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. And conceivably, the case could go to the Supreme Court of the United States, although I have to say that court takes very few military cases, and the fact that there's no conviction for aiding the enemy, which was the most hotly contested allegation, makes it much, much less likely that the justices would grant certiorari.
So we could be hearing about Bradley Manning for quite a long time, and the sentence could be very long in any case. One of the things I find interesting about this case is that he's a private, he's an enlisted man, and it brings back thoughts of Lindy England in the Abu Ghraib scandal. She was there, a private prosecuted. He's being prosecuted. Where were the officers, and why are the officers not being prosecuted in this?
That's a great question. The answer is, I gather, that there have in fact been some punishments handed out for people who permitted this ridiculous state of affairs to take place. I mean, this is astounding that a junior enlisted member could get access to this information and then get it out of secure areas by the most simple means. I gather that there have been some administrative punishments handed out. Maybe people got some bad performance evaluations. But frankly, I think as a part of the transparency, and particularly given the extraordinary interest around the world in this case, we really ought to know exactly who got punished for what. And I don't think that it's right for the government to say, well, that's all subject to the Privacy Act and we can't release it. If the government wanted to tell us who it had punished and why, it could do so, because this is a case of such great public moment.
Now, I mean, does it look to you then, the optics of this, like they've just found the lowest person on the food chain and said, it's you, you're going to take all the blame, we'll hand out some little bits and pieces, you know, slaps on the wrist for everyone else. Is that what you would say it looks like, whether or not that's the case?
No, I don't think it looks like that at all. I mean, Private Manning is the perpetrator here. There's no mystery as to why he was punished more severely than anybody else in sight. He's the actor. So, no, I think that's a misconception.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries, which is where we ask you. We like the experts coming on the show. Thank you very much. Eugene Fidell of Yale Law School. We appreciate your time, sir.
My pleasure.
I'm Simon Constable, and that was Digits.